The first sensation was cold, the second was confusion, and the third was the realization that cold and confusion were a package deal in the universe's least inviting gift wrap. Commander Thessa Branth blinked awake in her cryopod, a testament to the fact that even in the future, alarms still sounded like screeching banshees after a rough night. "Rise and shine, you lazy misfits," Thessa's voice cracked through the shared intercom as she wrestled herself free from the pod's embrace. Her breath crystallized in the air like tiny misplaced snowflakes, a charming reminder that the ship's climate control was about as reliable as a used chemlight. "Anyone else freezing their ass off, or is it just me?" A chorus of groggy groans and colorful expletives answered her, an orchestra of disorientation. Thessa smirked, rubbing the fog from her eyes. Her crew was nothing if not consistent in their distaste for mornings, especially when those mornings involved mysterious alien temples. "Where the hell are we?" grumbled Garrett Loom, the ship's engineer, as he pried himself out of his pod like a reluctant sardine. His hair stuck out in every direction, a testament to Cryosleep's total disregard for personal grooming. "Well, Loom, judging by the architecture that screams sacrificial altar, I'd say we're somewhere fancy," replied Thessa, gesturing at the towering stone columns that loomed ominously around them. Each was etched with glowing symbols, the sort of thing that screamed, "Touch me for a surprise." "Lovely, just lovely," Loom muttered, the sarcasm as thick as the frost on his jumpsuit. "I always wanted to kick off a mission with a little archaeology." "Yeah, well, you're not Indiana Jones and those aren't ancient artifacts. There probably do not touch buttons," chimed in Callista, the sharp-tongued navigator who appeared from behind her pod like she'd woken up on the wrong side of the galaxy. "Someone's been binge-watching old holo films," Thessa quipped, shooting her a grin. Callister responded with a smirk that suggested she'd happily push a do-not-push button just to see what would happen. The crew staggered to their feet, each taking stock of their surroundings. The temple was cavernous, like the universe's attempt at an open-plan office, but with more existential dread. The light came from nowhere and everywhere, a soft luminescence that seemed to mock the crew's confusion. "All right, folks, let's try not to break anything ancient and priceless," Thessa instructed, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Last thing we need is an angry alien curator on our backs." "Wouldn't be the first time," Loom muttered, recalling a particularly unpleasant encounter with a Zoranian art dealer who took personal offense to the concept of negotiation. As the crew fumbled about trying to make sense of their predicament, a subtle hum began to fill the air, rising in pitch and intensity. It was the kind of sound that suggested something big and ominous was about to happen. Guys," Nathan, the communications officer, pointed out the obvious. "I think we might have activated something." "Oh, fantastic," Callista sighed, rolling her eyes. "We're in an alien temple, touching alien things, and now we've turned on the alien welcome mat." The hum climaxed with a satisfying click, and a massive portal opened at the far end of the temple, revealing a view that was half breathtaking, half oh crap. Stars swirled around a yawning black hole, a cosmic drain that threatened to suck the life out of anything foolish enough to get too close. "That's new," Thessa murmured, her voice lost in the void's roar. "Okay, team, let's not panic." "Yet," Callista finished, peering at the wormhole like it owed her money. "What do we do, Captain?" Loom asked, his hands twitching with the urge to fix something, anything. "First, we figure out how we got here," Thessa replied, determination edging into her voice. "Second, we make sure we don't piss off the locals. And third," Nathan prompted, eyes wide with a mix of excitement and dread. "Third," Thessa grinned, "we try not to die." Unbeknownst to them, high above the temple, nestled in the shadows of their surveillance station, the Zelari watched with a mix of amusement and horror. These bumbling humans had stumbled into their most sacred site, like toddlers in a china shop, and now they were meddling with relics as ancient as time itself. "Are they worshipping it?" one Zelari observed, its voice a series of clicks and hums that roughly translated to disbelief. "Looks more like they're trying not to break it," another replied, waving a spindly limb at the screen. "Fascinating," mused the leader, its eyes narrowing with intrigue. "Let's see how this plays out." Back in the temple, Thessa and her crew were slowly piecing together the series of unfortunate events that had led them here. They'd been on a mission to investigate the wormhole, a scientific endeavor that had clearly gone off the rails and into the realm of ancient alien intrigue. "So what do these symbols mean?" Loom asked, gesturing to the glowing patterns on the wall. Callista shrugged. "Ask the Ancient Alien Art Appreciation Society." "Very helpful, Cal," Thessa said dryly, eyeing a particularly elaborate symbol that looked suspiciously like a middle finger. "Hey, you wanted cynicism, I deliver," Callista shot back, her grin wicked and unapologetic. As they bantered, Nathan was busy analyzing the environment with his trusty portable scanner, which beeped and whirred in its usual overworked manner. "I'm picking up energy signatures, Captain," he reported. "Nothing harmful, but definitely out of this world." "Yeah, no kidding," Thessa replied, staring at the portal. "That's what happens when you wake up in a cosmic cathedral. Should we try to contact someone?" "Anyone?" Loom suggested, looking at Nathan. "Sure," Nathan said, his voice thick with sarcasm. "I'll just dial up the nearest galactic operator and see if anyone wants to chat about today's religious experience." Thessa snorted. "All right, let's focus. Callista, see if you can plot us a course back to the ship without getting sucked into that thing." "Loom, check our systems and make sure we can still fly." The crew scattered to their tasks, a well-oiled machine even in the face of the unknown. But the Zelari weren't done observing. They watched with bated breath, witnessing what could only be described as a cosmic accident unfolding in real time. The Zelari leader decided it was time to intervene, if only to prevent the humans from accidentally blowing up their sacred site. "Initiate contact," it instructed, a hint of reluctant respect in its voice. "Let's see if we can enlighten our accidental pilgrims." Back in the temple, Thessa and her crew were jolted out of their focus by a new sound, a voice, strange and melodic, echoing through the chamber like a divine radio broadcast. "Greetings, humans," it said, each word dripping with an alien cadence that was both soothing and unsettling. "You stand in the Hall of Reverence, a place of great significance to the Zelari." "Just our luck," Callista sighed, throwing her hands up in mock surrender. "We wake up in the Vatican of space and we didn't even bring a gift." "We've got our charming personalities," Nathan offered, not entirely joking. "I am Zariel, keeper of the relics," the voice continued, unfazed by the human's banter. "Your presence here is unexpected." Thessa stepped forward, her expression a mix of determination and wry acceptance of their situation. "Zariel, huh? You wouldn't happen to have misplaced a wormhole, would you?" "The wormhole is a beacon," Zariel explained, with the patience of a deity used to dealing with lesser beings. "It draws in those destined to witness our history." "Fantastic," Thessa muttered, pinching the bridge of her nose. "We're cosmic tourists on a budget cruise." "Our intentions were purely scientific," she said louder. "We didn't mean to crash your holy party." "Your arrival was foretold," Zariel replied cryptically, the kind of statement that made Thessa want to punch something. "But your actions, they will determine your fate." "No pressure," Loom muttered, fiddling with his toolkit as if it might offer salvation. "You will be tested," Zariel warned. "Prove your worth and the Zelari may share their secrets." "And if we fail?" Nathan inquired, because someone always had to ask the awkward question. "Let's hope you don't," Zariel replied, with a finality that left no room for optimism. "For your sake." The voice faded, leaving the crew in a deep silence that was promptly filled by their collective sighs. "Well, at least we know why we're here," Thessa said, her voice tight with resolve. "Now we just have to survive it." "Piece of cake," Callista said, her sarcasm cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "Assuming that cake is made of antimatter and bad decisions." "Let's get to work," Thessa ordered, clapping her hands together with a decisiveness that belied her inner turmoil. We've got a wormhole to figure out, an alien civilization to impress, and a very high chance of screwing it all up." As the crew set about their tasks, the Zelari watched, curious and contemplative. The humans were unpredictable, irreverent, and utterly fascinating. This was going to be interesting, one way or another. And as Thessa and her team worked under the watchful gaze of the Zelari, they had no idea just how much was riding on their success, or their failure. The temple stretched out like the universe's labyrinthine practical joke, complete with cryptic symbols and relics that screamed, "Do not touch," louder than a toddler near a hot stove. Thessa and her crew moved cautiously, like kids navigating a haunted house, except this one came with the added bonus of potentially screwing with the fabric of reality. Who knew ancient temples came with mood lighting? Garrett Loom grumbled, squinting at the glowing symbols that lined the walls. They pulsed gently, like a soft-spoken warning, or maybe a countdown. "I'd kill for a manual right about now. Try not to kill anything," Thessa shot back, scanning the room with the look of someone who had lost her keys. Her eyes landed on a stone altar at the center, covered in alien artifacts that seemed to look back at her. "That's the last thing we need on our galactic resume." Callista, the navigator who clearly believed navigation was as much about SAS as it was about stars, was busy running her fingers over the symbols, her face a mask of mock fascination. "Looks like the universe's most intimidating pop quiz." Hope nobody forgot to study. Nathan, the communications officer, was checking his scanner like it held the secrets to the universe, or at least a decent Wi-Fi connection. Still no sign of life, but these readings are off the charts. Energy levels, radioactivity, the works. It's like this place is powered by a star, or a very angry god, Loom added, not entirely joking. He was fiddling with his toolkit, the universal bomb for engineers everywhere. If it couldn't be fixed with a wrench, it probably wasn't worth fixing. Meanwhile, high above in their cloaked perch, the Zelari observed with a mix of horror and amusement. Zariel, the leader, watched the screens with the patience of a parent watching their child perform a particularly disastrous school play. "What are they doing now?" one Zelari asked, its voice echoing through the chamber like a cautious whisper. "They appear to be investigating," Zariel replied, the alien equivalent of a shrug in his tone, "or trying to redecorate. Do you think they'll pass the trials?" Another inquired, its eyes fixed on the screens with a mix of fascination and dread. "Who knows?" Zariel mused. "But if they are anything like the last batch, this is going to be entertaining." Back in the temple, Thessa and her crew were blissfully unaware of their audience. They were focused on the task at hand, which mostly involved trying not to die in a blaze of cosmic stupidity. Thessa eyed a series of intricately carved stones on the altar. They glowed with a gentle, rhythmic light, as if to say, "Touch me, I dare you." "Well, these look important," she said, motioning for the rest of the crew to gather. "What's the worst that could happen?" Callista asked, clearly channeling the spirit of every horror movie character who ever uttered those cursed words. "Don't say that," Loom groaned, casting a wary glance at the glowing stones. "You know the universe has a twisted sense of humor." Thessa hesitated, then reached out and picked up one of the stones. It was surprisingly light, and as she held it, the symbols on its surface shifted, rearranging themselves like a puzzle coming to life. "Say, Captain, you haven't considered a career in archaeology, have you?" Nathan quipped, his grin wide enough to belong on a game show host. "Not unless I get to keep the ancient treasures," Thessa replied, her voice thick with sarcasm. As the crew examined the stone, the temple began to hum again, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The symbols on the walls flared, bathing the room in a light that was both beautiful and menacing. "Oh," Loom said, eyes wide. "I think we poked the bear." "You mean the cosmic deity," Callista corrected, her voice equal parts awe and disbelief. Before anyone could respond, the ground began to tremble. The symbols on the walls twisted and danced, creating a cascade of alien language that none of them could decipher. Well, this is new, Thessa muttered, her grip tightening on the stone. I don't suppose anyone knows how to read alien. I could try Google Translate, Nathan offered, his grin unrepentant. As the crew tried to make sense of the chaos, Zariel and the Zelari watched from above, their eyes wide with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. They've triggered the rite of ascendancy, one of the Zelari said, its voice a blend of awe and worry. Let's hope they're up to the challenge, Zariel replied, watching as the symbols swirled around the hapless humans. Or this will be over faster than the last group. Back in the temple, the crew was caught in the middle of a cosmic light show that seemed designed by an alien with a flair for the dramatic. The symbols formed a vortex, spiraling upwards before converging on the altar. Looks like we've opened Pandora's box, Thessa said, the stone vibrating in her hand. Only this time it's not just hope at the bottom. Great, Loom replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. And here I thought today was going to be boring. The symbols pulsed one final time, then vanished, leaving the room silent once more. The altar glowed with a soft, inviting light, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. Well, that was fun, Callista said, her voice filled with the kind of excitement only near-death experiences could inspire. What's next? Thessa turned to face her crew, the stone still cradled in her hand. I guess we find out what this thing does, she said, her tone a mix of resolve and exasperation. Or we could just leave, Nathan suggested, though his tone made it clear he didn't believe that was an option. Pretend none of this ever happened, sure, Loom replied, his voice dry. And maybe we'll wake up and find this was all a dream, or a very vivid hallucination, Callista added, her grin wide and unrepentant. Thessa weighed the stone in her hand, her mind racing with possibilities. Whatever they'd triggered, it was clearly important to the Zelari, but whether it was the key to their salvation or their doom was anyone's guess. Looks like we've got ourselves a choice, she said, her voice firm. We can run or we can see this through. And if we're wrong, Nathan asked, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and dread. Then at least we'll go out with a bang, Thessa replied, her voice tinged with dark humor. The crew shared a look, a silent understanding passing between them. They were in this together for better or worse. And if the universe had one last trick up its sleeve, well, they were going to face it head on. Let's do this, Thessa said, her voice steady and sure. We've come this far. No turning back now. With that, the crew set to work, each taking up their role with a determination born of desperation and camaraderie. In the face of the unknown, they were united, ready to face whatever the Zelari and the universe had in store for them. As the temple hummed with energy once more, Zariel and the Zelari watched, their own fate now inexplicably tied to these peculiar humans. The outcome remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. This was a day that would go down in the annals of Zelari history, for better or worse. And as Thessa and her team stood ready, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test both their resolve and their humanity. The Zelari leader leaned back, its expression a mix of hope and skepticism. The humans had surprised them, not just with their resilience, but with their unyielding spirit. Whether that would be enough to see them through the trials ahead remained to be seen. But for now, the show was just beginning. And as the humans prepared to step into the unknown, guided by a stone that might hold the key to salvation or destruction, there was one thing they all knew for certain. Whatever happened next, it was going to be one hell of a ride. Thessa Branth found herself staring at the stone in her hand, wishing it was a bottle of something strong instead. They'd been in the temple barely an Ior, and they'd already managed to play cosmic piñata with forces they didn't understand. But if you can't laugh at the universe's cruel sense of humor, what's the point? Loom, you're sure this thing isn't going to explode? Thessa asked, as they huddled around the altar. Loom scratched his head, his toolkit hanging from his belt like a safety blanket for engineers. Define sure. In my line of work, if it doesn't explode immediately, it's practically a success. Comforting, Callista said, clearly unimpressed. At least it's not ticking. Yet, Loom added, always the optimist. Thessa was about to retort when they heard it, a rustling sound like whispers carried on a breeze that had no business being indoors. The air grew heavy, charged with an energy that felt like a bad hangover waiting to happen. "Anyone else hear that?" Nathan's voice cut through the static silence like a static-laden radio. His eyes scanned the room, wary as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. "Great," Callista muttered. "Either we're being watched or the temple's got a PA system." The source of the noise soon became apparent. Emerging from the shadows, a group of figures appeared, their forms obscured by cloaks that shimmered like spilled oil. Their eyes glowed faintly under hoods that failed to hide their alien features. "Zelari priests," Loom said, his voice a mix of awe and a healthy dose of "we're screwed." One of the priests stepped forward, its movements fluid like water through reeds. Its eyes locked onto Thessa, who had suddenly become the center of attention in a drama she hadn't signed up for. Hey," Thessa began, "because what else do you say to a bunch of alien priests appearing in your personal space? We come in peace. No autographs." The priest made a series of gestures, symbols forming in the air before dissolving like smoke. Thessa hoped it was their way of saying hello and not the alien equivalent of a middle finger. "Anyone catch that?" Nathan asked. His translator blinked uselessly, a hunk of metal just as baffled as its owner. "Looks like we're gonna have to wing it," Callista said, her expression that of someone who just realized their navigation charts were in Klingon. Thessa took a deep breath, stepping forward, the alien stone still in her grip. The priest's eyes followed the movement, widening slightly. Thessa couldn't be sure, but they seemed almost reverent. "They think we're special," Callista whispered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe we should ask for a tour, or a map," Loom muttered, eyeing the labyrinthine architecture around them. "I'd kill for a map." The rest of the priests joined their leader, forming a semicircle around the crew. Thessa could feel the weight of their gaze, a silent expectation that hung heavy in the air. "Okay, time for Plan B," Thessa said, "because everybody knows Plan A never works." Arlo stepped forward. Lieutenant Arlo Venn, their diplomatic officer, stepped up with a smile that seemed more strained than usual. His job was to make first contact, not last rites, and Thessa hoped it would stay that way. "Greetings, esteemed Zelari," Arlo began, his words slow and deliberate as if he were addressing royalty or a toddler with a short fuse. "We come in peace." The priests remained silent save for a faint, otherworldly chanting that began to fill the room, their voices a chorus of alien song that defied earthly understanding. The crew exchanged glances, the kind that said, "Well, this is going swimmingly." "Maybe they're singing Kumbaya," Nathan suggested, his humor a thin veil over his nerves. "Or a funeral dirge," Loom snapped, not bothering to hide his grim outlook. Arlo cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of the situation. "We seek understanding and friendship. Perhaps you can help us translate." He pointed to the symbols, hoping the universal gesture for "help me, I'm lost" was also in vogue among the Zelari. The lead priest stepped closer, focusing on the stone in Thessa's hand. It reached out, its fingers almost touching the stone before pausing, then looking at Thessa with an expression that transcended language barriers. It was as if the priest saw something in Thessa that she couldn't begin to fathom. "Okay, this is getting creepy," Callista muttered. "They look like they think she's the chosen one." "Or the doomed one," Loom replied, his humor as dry as the dust covering the temple floor. The priest gestured towards the stone, its words a series of clicks and hums. Thessa felt the stone grow warm in her hand, the symbols shifting once more. "Looks like they're waiting for you to do something," Nathan said, tapping his scanner. "No pressure." "Yeah, thanks," Thessa replied, rolling her eyes skyward. "I'll just ask the universe for guidance." With a resigned sigh, she held out the stone, mimicking the priest's earlier gesture. The priest nodded, its expression softening, as if pleased by Thessa's attempt to communicate. "Well, at least they're not attacking us," Arlo said, his voice tinged with relief. "That's progress." "If only slightly," Callista quipped. "Next thing you know, they'll be inviting us to tea." The priest finally spoke, its voice a melody of clicks interspersed with what might have been words. The stone responded, glowing brighter, casting a warm light that bathed the room. "Looks like we're bridging the gap," Thessa said, wondering if the light show was a good or bad sign. "Or we're about to get vaporized," Loom added, "because sometimes you have to prepare for the worst." The priest gestured to the stone, then to Thessa, seeming to request something. Thessa hesitated, unsure of what it wanted. "Think they want a demonstration?" Callista asked, arching a brow. "Or they're asking for your autograph," Nathan joked, though his smile was strained. As Thessa deliberated, the air seemed to shimmer, the temple itself responding with a low hum. It was as if the place was alive, a sentient entity observing the unfolding drama with curious interest. "I've got a bad feeling about this," Loom said, channeling every sci-fi hero who ever faced certain doom. "Yeah, but when do you not have a bad feeling?" Thessa shot back, her eyes never leaving the priest. She took a deep breath and, with a silent prayer to whatever cosmic entities might be listening, offered the stone to the priest. It accepted the stone with gentle hands, its touch delicate as it placed the artifact on the altar. The other priests began to chant louder, their voices a harmonious blend that filled the temple. The altar responded, the symbols flaring to life in a dazzling display that seemed both ancient and futuristic. Guys, are we sure we want to be encouraging this?" Callista asked, her tone hovering between snark and genuine concern. "Too late now," Thessa said, watching as the symbols coalesced into a pattern that crowned the altar with a halo of light. The priest stepped back, eyes closed as if in prayer, and the crew watched, caught between awe and anxiety. "Well, this is either really good or really bad," Nathan said, his scanner beeping incessantly in his hand. "Let's just hope it's not the latter," Thessa replied, her voice a mix of determination and trepidation. As the light faded, revealing the stone now pulsing with energy, the priests bowed deeply. Thessa and her crew exchanged glances, unsure if they'd just passed a test or set themselves up for a cosmic prank of epic proportions. "So that's it?" Loom asked, breaking the silence with his usual tact. "We're not dead, so, yay us." "Looks like we have some new friends," Arlo said, his relief palpable. "Or they're just biding their time," Callista added, ever the cynic. Thessa didn't reply, her mind racing with questions. The priest's reverence suggested they saw something significant in the crew, but whether that boded well or ill remained to be seen. "Guess we continue with Plan B," Thessa said, turning to face her crew. "Whatever that is, improvise," Nathan suggested, his grin a defiant challenge to the universe. "Improvise," Thessa agreed, "because if you can't plan for the unknown, you might as well wing it. Let's see what else this temple has in store for us." As they prepared to move deeper into the temple's mysteries, the priests followed, their presence a silent promise of further revelations or perhaps more cosmic mischief. "So, anyone know how to say thank you in Zelari?" Callista asked, casting a glance at the solemn figures. "I'm sure they'll get the gist," Thessa replied, feeling the weight of the stone still lingering in her hand. "And if not, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." With that, they stepped forward, the path ahead as uncertain as the universe itself. Whatever trials awaited them, Thessa knew they'd face them together, armed with little more than their wits and a healthy dose of gallows humor. And as they ventured deeper into the temple, the Zelari priests close behind, one thing was certain. They were in for one hell of a ride. The room had gone quieter than a graveyard at midnight, except for the persistent hum vibrating through the temple walls. Thessa Branth, ever the picture of cautious optimism, scanned her crew with the kind of look generally reserved for children who just discovered the concept of electricity and a fork. She was the appointed leader after all, and leaders were supposed to have plans. "All right, folks," she began, clapping her hands together in a futile attempt to generate warmth. "Since our friendly neighborhood priests think we're the next best thing to sliced bread, let's see if we can use that to our advantage." Loom, the engineer with a penchant for pessimism, raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we, break out the human tech? We haven't even figured out how most of it works ourselves." "Exactly," Thessa replied with a grin that spoke volumes about her dwindling sanity. We're going to work that confusion to our benefit. Callista leaned against a column, arms crossed. So, plan B is to confuse them with our confusion. Brilliant, really. Better than plan C, where we just turn tail and run, Nathan chuckled, his eyes fixed on the mysterious symbols that pulsed rhythmically like a cosmic heart monitor. The Zelari priests continued to watch them with the intensity of someone who'd just found the last donut in the break room and wasn't sure if they should claim it. Thessa decided it was time to put their plan into action before the priests decided they were more trouble than their supposed divinity was worth. "Okay, Loom," she said, gesturing to his toolkit. "Let's show them what human ingenuity looks like when it's completely out of its depth." Loom sighed, his breath visible in the frigid air. "You want me to jury-rig something? How about a universal translator from, oh, I don't know, this wrench and some chewing gum, something like that?" Thessa shot him a sideways glance. "Or at least make it look impressive enough that they think we're doing something divine." With a reluctant nod, Loom crouched down, rummaging through his toolkit with the enthusiasm of a man sentenced to solitary confinement with only a Sudoku puzzle for company. He pulled out bits of wiring, a broken circuit board, and something that might have been part of a toaster. "Behold, the mighty human machine," he muttered with a wave of his hand, presenting it to the priests with mock reverence. "Can't decide if that's genius or just sad," Callista quipped, but her eyes twinkled with amusement. "Maybe both." Thessa gestured to the priests, her movements slow and deliberate. "We're just going to do our thing. You know, godly stuff." To their credit, the priests kept up the charade, their glowing eyes following every movement with the seriousness of a courtroom judge. Then, just as Loom made the connection between two wires, the temple walls shivered, sending a ripple through the air like a stone dropped in a pond. The Zelari priests began to murmur, their tones reverent. If Thessa didn't know better, she'd say they were impressed. Or possibly gearing up for a sacrifice, but one miracle at a time. Thessa," Nathan whispered, his voice barely audible over the growing cacophony of alien voices. "They're multiplying." Nathan was right. More priests were arriving, their cloaks shimmering like liquid darkness as they took their places around the altar. What was once a cozy gathering now looked more like a rock concert, and Thessa had the unsettling realization they might be the headline act. "Hey, Loom," Callista said, eyeing the growing crowd. "Think they'll want an encore?" "Only if it involves explosions," Loom replied, grimacing as his contraption sparked and fizzled. Arlo, ever the diplomatic officer, stepped forward with a smile so forced it could cut glass. "Esteemed Zelari, we present our offerings of technology. Our way of saying thank you for not, vaporizing us on sight." The priests didn't vaporize them, which was about as good as a standing ovation in their book. Thessa took a moment to enjoy the small victory before the reality of their situation came rushing back like a bad hangover. "So, we've shown them our toys. Now what?" Callista asked, her sarcasm barely concealing the edge of anxiety in her voice. "Now," Thessa said, thinking on her feet, "we wait and see if they think our toaster parts are the key to the universe." The air in the temple seemed to thrum with energy, the symbols shifting and changing as if they were alive. The Zelari priests began to chant, their voices rising in a melody that defied human comprehension. "Great a choir," Nathan muttered. "Always knew my life would end with a serenade." As the chanting reached a crescendo, the altar began to glow, the stone resting upon it pulsating with power. The priests looked to Thessa, their eyes expectant. "Guess we're supposed to do something," Thessa said, swallowing the lump of doubt lodged in her throat. "Any ideas?" "Smile and wave," Loom suggested, his tone half joking, half serious. "Yeah, because that always works," Callista scoffed. "But I say we go with it. Can't be any worse than standing around looking like idiots." With a resigned sigh, Thessa stepped forward, gesturing grandly to Loom's jerry-rigged device. "Behold our gift." The Zelari priests responded with a chorus of gasps, their eyes widening as if witnessing a miracle. or a traffic accident, but Thessa was feeling optimistic. "Looks like they're buying it," Arlo whispered, sounding more surprised than relieved. "Or they're just pretending to," Callista said, ever the skeptic. The temple's energy continued to rise, the air charged with what felt like static electricity. Thessa glanced at her crew, each one of them wearing expressions that ranged from bemused to downright terrified. "Well, at least we're not dead yet," Thessa said, because Gallo's humor was the only kind she had left. "Always a bright side," Nathan agreed, though he didn't look convinced. As the chanting died down, the lead priest approached Thessa, its eyes glowing brighter than ever. It reached out, touching the stone gently before turning back to the congregation of priests. A series of clicks and hums followed, the alien language flowing like music from another world. "Wait, I think they're expecting us to do something else," Loom said, his eyes darting between the priests and his malfunctioning invention. "Fantastic," Thessa muttered, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders like a lead cloak. "Now what? Just keep pretending we know what we're doing," Callista suggested, because there was nothing more human than brazen bluffing. The priest gestured towards the stone, then back to Thessa, as if asking for a command. It was a test, an opportunity, or possibly a cosmic joke at their expense. Either way, Thessa had to act. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, mimicking the priest's gestures. "Let there be light," the stone flared, casting the room in a brilliant glow that bordered on blinding. The priests erupted in joyous song, their voices a harmonious blend that vibrated through the temple. "Well, would you look at that," Loom said, shielding his eyes. "We're miracle workers now. Just what I've always wanted," Nathan deadpanned. "A career in celestial theatrics." As the light faded, leaving afterimages dancing in their vision, the priests bowed deeply, their gesture one of respect and awe. Thessa and her crew exchanged glances, a mix of triumph and disbelief etched on their features. "Looks like Plan B worked," Thessa said, her relief palpable. "For now," Callista warned, ever the realist. "But what if they want us to do it again?" "Then we improvise," Thessa replied, because at this point improvisation was their only strategy. "And hope they don't notice we're just making it up as we go along." With the priests still bowing, Thessa felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could pull this off without ending up as cosmic roadkill. Maybe. "Okay, team," she said, addressing her crew with renewed determination. "Time to explore deeper into the temple and see if we can find a way to communicate that doesn't involve smoke and mirrors." "Lead the way, fearless leader," Loom said with a mock salute. As they moved forward, the temple seemed to open up before them, corridors branching off like veins in a stone body. The Zelari priests followed, their presence both a reassurance and a reminder of the delicate balance they had to maintain. "Feels like we're walking into the lion's den," Callista said, her voice low. "Or a lion's spa day," Nathan added, his humor a fragile shield against the unknown. "Either way, let's not get eaten," Thessa said, because optimism was a habit she hadn't quite managed to kick. With every step, the crew felt the weight of their choices, the tension as thick as the dust-laden air. Ahead lay the promise of discovery, of understanding, or perhaps just more questions. "Anyone else feel like we're the universe's punchline?" Loom asked, his voice tinged with dark amusement. "Hey, at least it's a funny one," Thessa replied, because if they were going to face oblivion, they might as well do it with a grin. And as they ventured further into the temple's depths, the Zelari priests close at their heels, one thing was abundantly clear. Whatever awaited them, it was bound to be one hell of a story. There was an unsettling kind of predictability in their chaos. If the crew wasn't fighting for survival, the universe must have finally collapsed on itself out of sheer boredom. Thessa peered into the shadows ahead, the corridor feeling more like a throat ready to swallow them whole. "We've got to figure out what these priests want before they think playing tour guide isn't worth the trouble," Loom grumbled next to her, fiddling with a device that looked as likely to explode as to function. "If you think I can just slap together a universal translator, you've got more faith in miracles than I do. Isn't that what I pay you for?" Thessa shot back, a humorless grin tugging at her lips. Miracles and duct tape solutions, more like duct tape catastrophes, he shrugged, eyes squinting against the flickering lights that seemed to mock them with their inconsistency. Callista's voice sliced through the ambient hum. Anyone else feel like the Zelari are waiting for us to do something truly divine, like turning water into wine? Because I could really go for a drink. Don't tempt me, Nathan added from the rear, his tone light but edged with the kind of bitterness that only comes from prolonged exposure to impending doom. Thessa's attempt to manage her crew's waning morale felt like trying to steer a ship with a sail made of cheesecloth. Truth was, their situation was teetering somewhere between ludicrous and terminal. As they ventured further, the Zelari priests continued to follow, their silent presence adding a layer of surreal solemnity to the procession. The dim light played tricks, transforming them into specters with glowing eyes that could see right through the crew's facade. They turned a corner and found themselves in a larger chamber, the ceiling disappearing into darkness, the walls vibrating softly like a giant cat purring its displeasure. At the center, a dais carried a glowing orb, pulsating with the kind of energy that screamed, "Touch me and find out if you're fireproof." Looks like someone forgot to mention the part where we're supposed to solve alien Rubik's cubes, Nathan mused, crossing his arms and leaning against the wall, which promptly hummed a warning. "Okay, scratch that. No touching." "Great," Thessa muttered, scanning the room for any sign of a clue. Now we've got puzzles from hell with added dramatics. From somewhere behind them, Paxson Vire caught up, panting like he'd sprinted the whole way. "Hey, anyone here order a miracle with a side of technology stabilization?" "Because I'm fresh out of ideas unless you've got a spare nuclear reactor." "Just what we need," Loom quipped, more optimism on this sinking ship. Thessa glanced back at the priests, who seemed to be waiting patiently, or impatiently. It was hard to tell with all the glowing eyes. "Okay, Vire, what have you got?" "Not much," he admitted, pulling out a tablet that flickered like it was possessed. "Climate controls shot, hull integrity is holding by a thread, and the power's so low we're practically navigating by candlelight." "Perfect," Callista sighed. "So we're screwed then, only if we don't figure out how to keep these guys entertained." Thessa gestured to the Zelari, who were still chanting softly, as if the whole drama was just one big cosmic opera. "Maybe we should start charging admission," Nathan suggested. 10 credits ahead, and we might afford a ticket out of here. Or a last meal," Loom muttered, though he was more focused on his latest contraption, an assemblage of wires and despair. As the orb in the center flared brighter, the priest's chants grew louder, a dissonant harmony that filled the chamber. Thessa felt the vibrations under her feet, the energy building to a crescendo that promised either revelation or obliteration. "All right," Thessa said, trying to inject some authority into her voice. "Let's focus. Vire, can you divert any power to communications? Maybe we can send a distress signal." "Distress signal," Callista snorted. "We've been in distress since we woke up. At this point, it's just a memo." "Consider it a reminder then," Thessa replied, because if sarcasm was the glue holding them together, she'd wrap herself in it. Vire nodded, his fingers dancing over the tablet with the kind of speed that suggested desperation was a great motivator. "I'll see what I can do. No promises, though. Promises are for optimists," Loom said, his focus still on the device in his hands. "We're more in the realm of crossed fingers and blind faith." The chanting reached its peak, a cacophony that made the air feel dense, as if reality itself was warping. Thessa exchanged glances with her crew, their expressions a mix of fear and grim determination. "Okay," she said, exhaling slowly. "Let's see what happens when we touch the shiny thing." "Yeah, because that's always ended well," Nathan remarked, but he stepped forward with the others, the unspoken agreement binding them. As Thessa reached out, the orb's light intensified, washing over them in a wave that felt like standing at the edge of existence. The Zelari priest's voices faded, leaving only the hum of the orb's power. "Well," Thessa said, her hand hovering just inches away, "here goes nothing." Again, With a tentative touch, she connected with the orb, the energy flowing through her like an electric charge. The chamber lit up, revealing ancient engravings on the walls, symbols that danced and shifted, forming patterns that hinted at a language long forgotten. The priests erupted into applause, or an alien equivalent, clearly impressed by the crew's boldness. Or maybe they were just relieved the humans hadn't incinerated themselves. "Feels like we just won a cosmic game show," Callista said, shielding her eyes from the glare. "Let's just hope the prize isn't a swift death," Loom added, ever the pessimist, but his grin suggested he was enjoying the spectacle despite himself. Thessa withdrew her hand, the orb's glow dimming to a more bearable level, and looked around at her crew. There was a spark of hope in their eyes, a flicker that hadn't been there moments before. "All right, folks," she said, her voice steady with the kind of resolve that comes from having nothing left to lose. "Let's figure out how to use this to our advantage." Vire was already at his tablet, the flickering lights stabilizing as he worked. "I think I might be able to use this energy to boost our systems," he said, the excitement in his voice betraying his usual cynicism. "Then do it," Thessa urged. "Before this place decides to change its mind about us." As Vire focused on his task, Thessa turned her attention back to the Zelari priests. "Let's hope they are as patient as they seem," she murmured to Callista, who nodded in agreement. "Patience is probably their thing," Callista replied. "Or they're just waiting for us to make the first move so they can blame us if it all goes south." "Story of our lives," Nathan chuckled, though there was a seriousness in his eyes that belied his tone. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness, the air taut with anticipation. The vibrations underfoot continued, a reminder that time was not on their side. "I've got it," Vire said suddenly, his voice breaking the tension like a hammer through glass. "I've rerouted enough power to get the comms up. We might actually be able to send a signal." "Do it," Thessa ordered, watching as he keyed in the commands with the kind of precision that only comes from the edge of desperation. "Message sent," Vire announced, the words an echo of hope in the silence that followed. "Now we wait," Thessa said, feeling the weight of their predicament settle back onto her shoulders, "and pray someone out there is listening." As the crew gathered around, the Zelari priests resumed their chant, a soothing melody that seemed to fill the void left by their uncertainty. Thessa allowed herself a small smile, the kind that only comes when the darkest Ior shows a sliver of dawn. "Looks like we're not dead yet," Nathan observed, his words carrying a humor that was both grim and comforting. "Here's hoping it stays that way," Thessa replied, "because if they were going down, they'd do it with their heads held high and their spirits unbroken." The room hummed with the combined energy of alien technology and human determination, a symphony of sound that spoke of survival against the odds. And as the crew settled into the uneasy calm, one thing was clear: they had become part of a story far greater than themselves, and the next chapter was still unwritten. Thessa Branth stood in the vibrating chamber, the dim glow of the orb casting eerie shadows on the crew's faces. The Zelari priests continued their soft chanting, adding a surreal soundtrack to their precarious predicament. She could almost hear the universe whispering, "Hey, wanna roll the dice one more time?" Callista nudged Thessa with an elbow. "So what's the plan? Pray they don't sacrifice us to their alien gods." "At this point I'm more worried they'll make us sing along," Nathan quipped, his voice a low grumble. "I've heard alien karaoke is the worst." Garrett Loom, still fiddling with his gadget, looked up with a smirk. "You've never heard Thessa's shower rendition of Space Oddity, truly otherworldly." "Focus, people," Thessa said, though she couldn't help but crack a smile. "Let's not add public humiliation to our list of potential disasters." The air was thick with tension, the kind that wraps around you like an unruly scarf. Thessa's gaze swept over her crew, taking in their expressions: fear, determination, and the ever-present skepticism. It was time to find a way out of this mess. "So, anyone here suddenly fluent in ancient alien languages?" Callista asked, only half joking. "Because now would be a great time for a revelation." It was then that science officer Lyra Shan, who had been quietly examining the engravings, stepped forward, her eyes alight with a spark of realization. "Actually, I think I've got something." The crew turned as one, their expressions ranging from hopeful to outright skeptical. "Please tell me it's more than a hunch," Nathan muttered. Lyra ignored him, her fingers tracing the symbols on the wall. "These symbols aren't just decorative. They're a language, a blend of mathematics and linguistics. I think it's their religious text. Or at least the Zelari version of how to win friends and influence humans." Thessa raised an eyebrow. "And you can read this," Lyra shrugged. "More like interpret. The patterns suggest a way to communicate intentions or request understanding. It's like a cosmic phrasebook." "Great," Loom said, eyeing his device with renewed interest. "Now we just have to hope the translation doesn't accidentally offend someone's grandmother." Thessa nodded, feeling the stirrings of hope for the first time since they'd stepped into this bizarre temple. "All right, Lyra, what can we do with this? Can we use it to tell the Zelari we're not here to pillage their sacred orb room?" Lyra's fingers danced over the symbols, her mind working at a pace that bordered on miraculous. "If we align our communication systems with their energy matrix, we might be able to send a message, something they can actually understand." "Align communication systems with an alien energy matrix," Vire echoed, eyebrow raised. "Sounds simple. I'll just run to the store and pick up some universal adapters." "Hey, we're human," Callista interjected. "Improvisation is in our DNA. Or maybe it's just desperation," Nathan added. "Either way, let's hope it works." Lyra continued, her voice steady. "We just need to sync our systems with the orb's energy. The symbols here suggest a sequence, a kind of handshake protocol. If the Zelari are listening, they should respond. Sort of like intergalactic Morse code," Thessa mused, a plan beginning to form. "All right, Vire, can we divert enough power from the orb without frying our systems?" Vire scratched his chin, considering. "If I can tap into the orb's energy to stabilize our systems, maybe we can send a low-power signal. The tricky part is not blowing ourselves up in the process." "A fine line," Loom said, a grin tugging at his lips. "But then again, explosions are just part of the fun, right?" With a deep breath, Thessa surveyed her team. "Okay, people, let's make this work. Lyra, guide us through the symbol sequence. Vire, get the comms ready. Everyone else, cross your fingers and hope any miscalculation doesn't end with us becoming stardust." The crew moved with a shared sense of urgency, each member focused on their task. As Lyra began to recite the sequence, Vire's fingers flew over his controls, trying to coax the temperamental tech into compliance. The room's hum grew louder, the orb's energy pulsating in time with the flickering lights. Thessa watched, her heart pounding in her chest, feeling like each second stretched into eternity. This was the moment, their last-ditch effort, the culmination of human stubbornness and ingenuity. As Vire initiated the sequence, the lights flickered, dimming momentarily before bursting back to life in a dazzling display. The orb pulsed with an intensity that seemed almost sentient, as if acknowledging their efforts. The Zelari priests paused in their chanting, their glowing eyes fixed on the orb, an unspoken communication passing between them. Thessa could feel a shift in the air, a collective holding of breath as the moment stretched taut. Vire looked up from his console, his expression both triumphant and wary. "Signal sent. Let's hope they reply and not with a laser beam." "Now we wait," Thessa said, her voice steady but edged with tension. "And try not to look like we're on trial for universal heresy." Callista chuckled softly, the sound a bomb against the nervous energy in the room. "Always wanted to be a part of interstellar diplomacy. Didn't think it'd involve so much potential for spontaneous combustion." "Humans," Nathan added with a wry smile. "Always hoping for the best while preparing for the worst." Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. The Zelari priests exchanged glances, their silent communication as alien as everything else about them. Thessa fought against the rising tide of anxiety, forcing herself to remain calm in the face of uncertainty. Then, just as the tension threatened to snap, the chamber resonated with a new frequency. The orb pulsed with a gentle glow, a rhythm that seemed to echo Lyra's sequence. The priests resumed their chanting, this time with a note of harmony as if acknowledging the crew's effort. Thessa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I think it worked." Lyra nodded, the relief evident on her face. The symbols were right. They understood. "Thank the stars," Vyre muttered, his hands shaking slightly as he powered down the system. "I was about 2 seconds from having an aneurysm." Thessa's gaze swept over her crew, their faces a blend of exhaustion and elation. "Looks like we've made contact. Let's hope this means we're not about to become permanent residents of this temple." The Zelari priests approached, their movements fluid and deliberate. One of them, taller than the rest, extended a hand, a gesture that seemed universal in its simplicity. Thessa stepped forward, extending her own hand in response. "Let's hope this is the start of a beautiful friendship," she said, her voice tinged with hopeful sarcasm. Callista laughed softly. "Yeah, because nothing says friendship like nearly dying together." The priest's touch was surprisingly warm, and Thessa felt a connection, a sense of shared understanding that transcended language. Maybe they weren't so different after all. "All right, folks," Thessa said, turning back to her crew. "We've got our foot in the door. Let's see if we can talk our way out of this mess." As they began to explore their newfound alliance, the Zelari priests leading them through the temple's corridors, Thessa felt the weight of their journey. They had stared into the abyss and come out the other side, not because they were fearless, but because they had no other choice. "Here's to human tenacity," Loom said, falling into step beside her. "No matter how stubbornly stupid it sometimes is." "Here's to survival," Thessa replied, her voice steady with the knowledge that they had achieved the impossible. "And maybe, just maybe, finding a way home." The temple's walls hummed softly, a living testament to the power of understanding and the indomitable spirit of humanity. As they moved forward into the unknown, Thessa knew they had become a part of something far greater, a story that would continue to unfold, one defiant step at a time. End of Part 6. Thessa glanced around the temple chamber, taking in the expressions of her crew. Relief was a rare commodity these days, but it looked like they'd found a smidgen of it. For now. She wasn't about to start doing cartwheels just yet. Those usually ended with someone breaking an ankle or worse. "So, what now?" Garrett Loom asked, his fingers still twitching like he hadn't quite relinquished the urge to tinker. "Do we exchange heartfelt vows with the glowy-eyed choir boys?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Thessa replied, eyeing the Zelari priests. "We just managed to say hello without getting vaporized. Let's see if we can make small talk. You know, the kind that doesn't involve sacrificial rituals." The Zelari priest who'd extended his hand looked like he was either incredibly patient or utterly confused by the human penchant for sarcasm. His glowing eyes flickered slightly, as if attempting to decipher the strange gestures and tones coming from the babbling primates in front of him. "Lyra, you're our translator. Any chance you can tell them we're not here to steal their precious orb or, desecrate the temple?" Thessa asked. Lyra nodded, her mind still buzzing with the patterns and sequences. "I'll do my best. If nothing else, I can try to emphasize our non-squiggly intentions." "Non-squiggly intentions," Nathan snorted. "Why didn't you just say so from the start? That's practically universal." Ignoring him, Lyra focused on the symbols once more, speaking slowly, her words a mix of alien sounds and human tongue. The Zelari priest listened, his glowing eyes narrowing, perhaps in thought, perhaps in judgment. Or maybe he just needed contacts. The rest of the priests murmured softly, their chanting a subtle undercurrent to the conversation. Thessa crossed her arms, trying to look confident, or at least not terrified. "So, did anybody pack a universal peace treaty in their bags? I seem to have left mine in my other spacesuit." Callista chuckled, shaking her head. "I think I left mine next to the manual for not getting stranded on an alien planet. right there with the map of the universe marked "Here be dragons." Vire, the crew's engineer and all-around fix-it guy, leaned against a stone column, watching the lights flicker. "If this goes south, we can always fall back on our secret weapon." "Which is?" Thessa asked, raising an eyebrow. "Running away," Vire replied with a grin. "Works every time." "Well, almost." Thessa rolled her eyes but couldn't help the corner of her mouth quirking up. "Let's try diplomacy first, shall we? It tends to involve fewer blisters." Lyra continued her attempts to communicate, fingers tracing symbols as she spoke. The Zelari priest finally nodded, gesturing to his fellow priests who seemed to relax, their postures softening. A good sign, Thessa hoped, unless relaxation was stage 1 in their alien dismemberment protocol. The priest turned, gesturing for the crew to follow. Thessa nodded, signaling her team to move. "All right, keep close and try not to touch anything." "We don't need another incident like, well, every mission ever," Garrett Loom snorted. "I'm not the one who set the medical bay on fire last year." "Hey, I was trying to make coffee," Callista defended. "It was a learning experience." "Yeah, what did you learn?" Nathan asked, amusement in his voice. "That I'm better at drinking coffee than making it," Callista shot back with a grin. They followed the Zelari through the corridors, the walls still humming with an energy that seemed to seep into their bones. It was oddly comforting, like the universe was whispering, "Hey, you're not dead yet." Thessa couldn't help but feel a strange kinship with these aliens. Maybe it was the glow-in-the-dark eyes or the fact they hadn't incinerated her yet. Either way, it was progress. As they entered a larger chamber, Thessa's gaze swept upward to the ceiling, where more symbols glowed softly. It was like stepping into the inside of the galaxy's most intricate clock, all gears and glowing cogs. Or maybe she'd just been awake too long and was beginning to hallucinate. "Nice decor," she quipped, breaking the silence. "I've always wanted to live inside a lava lamp." The priest stopped, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, Thessa thought she'd overstepped, but then he touched a symbol on the wall and the entire chamber shifted, the lights dimming to reveal a holographic display of the temple, its energy flows, and something that looked suspiciously like a prophecy. "Ah, prophecy," Callista said. "The gift that keeps on giving." Like an interstellar chain letter. Lyra examined the display, her eyes wide with understanding, or at least a decent approximation of it. This is incredible. It's a map of their belief system, their history, and, if I'm reading it right, a foretelling of events." Thessa nodded, trying to wrap her head around the implications. "Great, just what we needed." We stepped into an ancient alien PowerPoint presentation. Vire moved closer, studying the flows of energy. "It's not just prophecy. Looks like they've been expecting visitors." "Great," Nathan muttered. "Just what we need, more fan clubs." Garrett Loom chuckled. "Well, at least we didn't show up empty-handed. We brought sarcasm and confusion." "A human specialty." The Zelari priest gestured to a point on the display where their ship's arrival was depicted. Thessa frowned, squinting at the alien hieroglyphs. "So they were expecting us, or someone like us." Lyra nodded, her excitement palpable. "I think they believe we're part of some grand convergence, that we're meant to be here to save the universe," Callista interrupted, grinning. "Because I didn't pack my superhero cape." "More like coexist," Lyra corrected, her tone serious. "They believe we're part of a new era, one where understanding and cooperation are key." Thessa considered this, her mind spinning with possibilities. "So they are not planning to turn us into some kind of cosmic sacrifice." The priest made a sign, one that seemed to indicate negation, or maybe indigestion. Either way, it seemed positive. "Well, that's a relief," Thessa said, trying to feel the weight lifting from her shoulders. "It's not every day you find out you're not a cosmic BBQ." Garrett Loom shook his head, smirking. "Speak for yourself. I always thought I'd end up as some alien's idea of a kebab." Vire sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right then, if we're all done with the gallows humor, shall we figure out how to make this work?" The Zelari priest gestured again, leading them to another chamber filled with more symbols. As they walked, Thessa felt a sense of purpose mingled with the ever-present anxiety of their situation. They were on the cusp of something big or possibly explosive. It was always a 50-50 chance with them. Once inside, the priest activated another display, this time showing potential futures. Lines of energy spread across the room, connecting symbols with points of light that flickered like stars. Thessa studied the display, trying to make sense of it. "I'm guessing these are possible outcomes." Lyra nodded, already engrossed in deciphering the patterns. "If we align their energy with Ior's, work together instead of against, the future looks, well, let's explode why." "Always a good start," Nathan said, leaning against a pillar. "I'm a big fan of not exploding." "But," Lyra continued, frowning slightly, "it means we'll need to leave some of our tech behind, integrate it with theirs. It's the only way to ensure stability." Thessa considered this, weighing the risks against their current situation. "Our ship is old tech anyway, barely held together by duct tape and hope. If it means saving our skins and making an ally, I say we go for it." The crew exchanged glances, nodding their agreement. It wasn't like they had a plethora of options. Either they collaborated and made nice with the glow-eyed locals, or sit around waiting for their ship to rust into oblivion. "All right," Thessa said with finality. "Let's make this work. Lyra, can you coordinate with their tech guys or priests, or whatever they are?" Lyra smiled, the challenge firing her neurons in the best way possible. "Absolutely. It'll be like a cross-cultural tech support hotline." "How hard could it be?" Garrett Loom snickered. "Famous last words, Lyra, famous last words." The Zelari priest made a sign that seemed to suggest understanding and agreement. Thessa took it as a good omen, or at least not a terrible one. "Well," Callista said, clapping her hands together, "looks like we're all set for a new chapter of human-alien relations. At least until someone screws it up. No pressure, right?" Vire added, shaking his head with a wry smile. As the crew got to work, collaborating with their Zelari counterparts, Thessa felt a cautious optimism spreading through her. For the first time, the universe didn't seem so vast and indifferent. They were carving out a small corner of understanding in the endless night. Or at least trying not to accidentally declare war. "Here's to galactic peace," Nathan said, raising an imaginary glass. "Or as close as we can get while still being sarcastic jerks." "Here's to not getting blown up," Thessa corrected, feeling the weight of their task but buoyed by their resilience. "And maybe, just maybe, finding our way back home with a story worth telling." As the temple hummed around them, Thessa realized that the universe, with all its cosmic jokes and pitfalls, still held the chance for cooperation, even for a scrappy crew like hers. And that was worth more than any star map or treasure. It was the beginning of something new, something that made the vast, uncaring void feel a little less empty. The Zelari and humans stood at the precipice of cooperation, a dizzying concept considering that just eons ago, the humans were one footstep away from cosmic toast. Thessa Branth, ever the leader, surveyed the unholy alliance with an expression that could only be described as cautious optimism and a touch of skepticism. "All right, team," she began. "Let's not trip over our own ego and ruin this delicate Kumbaya moment." Callista, ever the jokester, raised an eyebrow. "So, how do we break the news that we're not gods here to save them, but rather a bunch of misfit explorers with a knack for sarcasm and a tendency to bungle things up?" Lyra Shan stepped forward, her usual calm demeanor betraying a hint of excitement. "I think they've already caught on to that. The Zelari seem more interested in our tech, or what's left of it after Garrett's last experiment." Garrett Loom snorted, tapping the device strapped to his waist. "Hey, it's not my fault that our ship's wiring looks like it was designed by a drunk octopus. Besides, I only blew up the microwave once." "Twice," Nathan corrected, arms crossed. "Let's not forget the time you tried to make a universal remote and ended up summoning a swarm of space bees. Not that there are space bees, but if there were, you'd be responsible." Thessa rubbed her temples. "Can we focus on not screwing up this alliance?" I'd like to avoid instigating any accidental interstellar incidents. The Zelari priest, glowing eyes alight with what might have been amusement, or perhaps just the light, it was hard to tell, gestured towards the chamber's intricate display. The holographic prophecy now showed interconnected paths of potential futures, glimmering like a cosmic web of "Don't screw this up." Lyra translated the priest's gestures, her voice steady. He says that by sharing knowledge, we can bridge the differences between our species. Apparently, they aren't keen on the whole deity worship thing either. Callista grinned. They probably saw Thessa's coffee-making skills and realized gods couldn't possibly be that inept. Thessa shot her a look. Let's keep my culinary disasters off the negotiating table, shall we? Meanwhile, Vyre was already deep in conversation, or whatever passed for it, about engine schematics with another Zelari. You know, they've got some nifty tech here. Not that Ior's is useless or anything, but maybe if we mix theirs with Ior's, we might actually get the ship running with fewer explosions. Fewer explosions, Garrett mused. A lofty goal for us indeed. The Zelari seem to appreciate Vyre's enthusiasm, or maybe they just found his animated rant about energy efficiency charming. Either way, they nodded along, likely understanding more than they let on. All right, so we make a deal, Thessa said, bringing the group's attention back. We trade knowledge, tech, and the occasional sarcastic remark. They help us get out of this star system without adding any more craters to the ship. Everyone wins. Nathan raised an imaginary glass. To not dying a fiery death on an alien planet. Again, added Callista, the memory of their last near-death experience still fresh. The Zelari priest watched their exchange, his eyes shimmering with what might have been bemusement, or possibly indigestion. The jury was still out. He made a series of gestures, which Lyra interpreted as an invitation to collaborate further. We're invited to explore their archives and tech, Lyra explained, a spark of curiosity igniting in her eyes. Imagine what we could learn, how many mysteries we could unravel. Garrett chuckled. Probably a lot more than just the mystery of how to properly align our ship's thrusters. Callista elbowed him. And maybe we'll finally figure out how to make coffee without setting off the fire alarms. Or maybe we'll discover the secrets of the universe, Nathan added, not missing a beat, like why the hell we can never find the right socket wrench when we need it. Thessa shook her head, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. All right, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. We've got a long way to go before we're swapping intergalactic recipes. The priest gestured, guiding them through another chamber that buzzed with energy. The walls hummed a familiar tune, one that Thessa found oddly comforting. The universe seemed to be whispering, "You're not dead yet. Keep at it." As they entered the new chamber, it was clear that the Zelari were serious about this collaboration. Holographic displays filled the space, depicting star systems, energy fields, and technological blueprints that made Garrett's tinkering look like a child playing with building blocks. If this isn't the universe's most ambitious science fair, I don't know what is, Callista quipped, wide-eyed at the sheer scale of information. Lyra was already immersed, her fingers dancing over the displays, absorbing the knowledge like a sponge. This is incredible. They've mapped out wormholes, energy conversions, things we've barely scratched the surface of. Vyre nodded appreciatively. If we could integrate even a fraction of this tech, we'd not only make it out of this system, but we'd come back with enough knowledge to make us legends. Or laughingstocks, Nathan countered, ever the cynic. Depends on how well we play this. Garrett, however, was already dreaming up new contraptions. Just imagine what kind of devices we could make. I mean, sure, they'd probably explode on the first try, but the potential is there. Thessa shook her head with a sigh. Let's aim for fewer explosions, remember. The Zelari priest, seeing the humans' enthusiasm, or perhaps just their manic energy, gestured to the largest display, a galactic map that highlighted a swirling mass in the distance. The wormhole. Their ticket home or to oblivion, depending on how reliable the Zelari intel was. Lyra translated, her voice tinged with awe. They believe this wormhole is the key to accessing new realms, to unlocking potential we can't even begin to imagine. Or it's a cosmic garbage disposal, Nathan suggested dryly. Either we end up in a new universe or as space gunk. That's the spirit, Garrett chimed in. Always a ray of sunshine, Nathan. Thessa considered the map, the possibilities, and the risks. All right, crew. Looks like we're going where no human has gone before again. Let's try not to be idiots about it, okay? Callista grinned, nudging Thessa. What's the worst that could happen? Besides, total annihilation. Thanks for the pep talk, Callista. As the crew and Zelari worked together, exchanging knowledge, ideas, and the occasional sarcastic remark, Thessa felt a strange sense of unity forming. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but for the first time she felt that they were on the cusp of something bigger than themselves. Here's to new beginnings, she said, raising an imaginary glass along with the rest of her crew. And to not screwing it up, Nathan added, ever the realist. Together, humans and Zelari set their sights on the wormhole, their shared knowledge lighting the way. It was uncertain, dangerous, and possibly the worst idea they'd ever had. But for Thessa and her ragtag team of explorers, it was the beginning of a journey that could change everything, or at least give them one hell of a story to tell. As they prepared to embark on this new journey, Thessa realized that sometimes the universe wasn't just an indifferent void. In rare moments, it offered the chance for cooperation, for understanding, for something more. And that, in the grand scheme of things, was worth risking the occasional explosion. As they moved forward, the laughter and camaraderie of her crew mingling with the alien chants of the Zelari, Thessa felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd find their way back home with more than just a tale of survival. They'd return with a testament to what was possible when disparate worlds came together, determined not just to survive, but to thrive. With a final glance at the swirling map, Thessa led the way, her crew close behind, ready to tackle whatever lay beyond the stars. The universe, it seemed, wasn't quite done with them yet. And that was just fine by them.